there, we're going to try something a little different today. It's going to be a world building case study, which I'm going to hopefully make a new series of when I finish books. We're going to try to look at what the authors did to make their world building so effective and inspired, and that people want to keep going back there. So these will be popular series, and there'll be first books in the series because that's what's kind of established it and what made them popular, so that people kept wanting to come back. And for our first one, we're going to do Stormfront, which is the Harry Dresden series by Jim Butcher. Don't remember how many books are there, but there's a lot of them, and these used to be actually my airplane books along with the Anita Blake novels. Whenever I was going somewhere, I'd go and pick one up, and we'll get into that because it's episodic in a little bit. But I'm going to again focus on just the first book, which is Stormfront, and see what it was that opened up the world that made people want to keep coming back all the time. This was not the first one I wanted to do, but both my wife and my child are sick, and so throughout the night I kept having to get up, which found me finishing this book at 4 in the morning, and which is why it's still on my mind, with little is left of it at the moment. So again, we're going to look at the world building because that's one of the 4 table legs that holds up the fantasy genre, along with prose, characters, and what was the other one? Prose, characters, and plot. That's kind of important too. And so we're going to be a little minor spoilers, but it's not going to be about what I thought about the book, but about the world building itself. But if you have lived under a rock and don't know what Harry Dresden is, he's a wizard detective, lives in Chicago, and that's what makes this an overlaid fantasy opposed to a secondary world, in that it involves the real world and then adds things to it, adds fantasy conceits, in this case magic, and what we'll also get into. While it was an airport book for me, it was because it's episodic, meaning that you can pick up the book or the series at any point in time. Each episode doesn't really have to do with the next one. They're not sequential. You don't have to read 2, so you can read 3, so you can read 4. You can pick up 4 and know that some of the things that happened before, who the main characters are, that kind of thing. That's part of it. But for the most part, it's standalone stories, which is pretty good. It's also told in the first-person POV, which is a very tight one. It's very immersive. Hopefully, I have Jemison's triangle up right now of what the immersion is. So with the high immersion, you're able to get information to the audiences a lot faster. But before we dig into that and how he pulled these things off, let's look at the world itself. As I said, it's overlaid Chicago. All of it takes place within a 50-mile radius of Chicago. And the conceits are that, just going down the chart, first, geography, and it's not really seen in this, but he mentions the Never Never, which I don't actually know what it is. I've read these books before, but it's been 10 years since I've read this first one, but doing research for urban fantasy, so this is a good place to start. So the sites, in terms of geography, it all seems very real world. He mentions the Never Never, so that could probably be another realm that I'll go into in geography later. Biology, this one was kind of hard to parse because there's vampires, there's fairies, there's demons, and the spirits and demons usually fall under metaphysics, and the vampire and the fairies don't seem to go under they don't seem to abide by the laws of of biology as we know them. So they probably fall under metaphysics, but they could fall into biology if, depends on how they play out later. From what I read so far, it seems pretty metaphysical. The big conceit is magic, which falls into physics, and we'll get into the magic system in just a little bit. But he had spells that he was throwing out. He had his soul gaze. Anytime you looked into his eyes, he can read your mind, and you can not read their mind, but know the person's soul, they know his. And there's a lot of potions that he used as well. Again, metaphysics, which is also, gods and stuff. There weren't many gods as of yet, just supernatural creatures that don't abide by the laws of biology. And technology doesn't seem to be one at first, but technology doesn't work for him. He fizzes it out, so anything after, I think he said 1940s, he tries to avoid. So he can use a revolver, but if he picks up a telephone, tries to talk on it, it fizzes out. And that was used really well, actually, because at first it was just a kind of cool detail, but then it was used to raise the tension later when certain things didn't work, or was able to, the phone dropped, or it's the equivalent of horror movies when the cell reception just quit. He was able to use that conceit of his very well to increase the tension. And finally, culture. I didn't see much of it in this time, but they hint at it. The White Council, they have a bit of a masquerade, which is the idea that magic has to remain hidden from people, even though they have a magic reporter who's reporting on things for her paper about the magic world. And there's a police detective who is assigned to these paranormal cases and is working with him because of it. Harry, lists himself in the yellow pages, if they still have yellow pages, under wizard. And so, there is a masquerade. It's kind of loose in it, if people are allowed to do it. He was pretty happy to throw his magic around in front of others, in front of the mundane people, but then again, they were being chased by demons and such. So, light masquerade, and that's the point. So, we've got all the major conceits out of the way. The magic system is something to really focus on, since it is a book that is the prime mover in that, it's about a wizard. So the magic must be pretty well developed, you'd think. And it is, for the most part. It was very entertaining, very enjoyable, but I would put this one really as a points opaque in my system that is hopefully displayed somewhere on this screen. A point opaque is pretty much kind of a go-to for urban fantasy, is then these are the rules to it, but they're pretty loose. The idea is that you have abilities, and stronger abilities have kind of more of a cost. You understand that weaker abilities are easier to do, and harder abilities, based on the amount of stuff they can do, will be harder and take more of an energy supply. Harry keeps referring to it, and but he doesn't say what it is. He didn't say, I have 80 mana I can use right now, and so I've got to use them this way. He says, oh, that's really a hard spell to do, but he doesn't tell you how much you could do it. And so this was a go-to kind of magic system. I use Buffy a lot as an example, with Willow's magic and such. It was also a kind of it's going to be a really hard spell, but we can't say how hard exactly, and we can fudge the details when it's a soft opaque like this one. Let me see. But the great things about it is that Harry is able to use the first-person POV and just explain directly to the audience what the rules are. So all of a sudden he'll say, oh, I need my focus object, or I need my staff to do this, and this is why the staff can do this. And so because of that high immersion and the first-person point of view, you don't really have to go into the Chekhov's gun of establish what the magic is ahead of time, what the rules are, so that they can use it. He can just tell you what it is, info dump to you directly as the reader, because you're experiencing his thoughts and he's explaining it to you. So that was really good for using the focus and the harnessing the power. And what's interesting is there's no real upper limits to the power. You seem to be able to do pretty much anything as of yet. It exists that some things are more difficult than others. Then he was able to transition it to a fluctuating cost. Hopefully, again, it's up on the screen. Fluctuating cost is kind of the cheat that they use, with potions. I have another video about that if you'd like to delve into it. So they used a cost cheat in this one a lot, not just with the potions that the spirit helps them make, and by having to put a lot of more effort, a lot of items like a $50 bill into it, so there's a definite cost in making the potions, but also in the magic system itself of finding the fuel source. So Harry will be like, oh, well, you can't do this. Wait, I can get more power if I do this really dangerous and chancy thing. So it was established a little bit ahead of time, specifically taking the storm, which is part of the title, yada yada. And so it was pretty cleverly done, saying, oh, you can't do this, it's very risky. Oh, I'm going to do it because it's so risky. So that became a kind of cost system where he's explained what he's risking when he's doing it, so there is a cost in that. And it also used some aspects of the leveling system, and this was very clever in that part of a leveling system is that you have, these are our pretty much abilities, and the people we are fighting are much higher abilities. So Harry Potter is a perfect example, where each year we're taught these certain things, is what we can do with it, but we're fighting adults who have much more powerful things, so we have to use our powers cleverly. Harry was the same way, that he had to use these powers against demons and powerful things that he shouldn't be fighting in the first place. But Butch made it a good point to really handicap him and then show how he used it cleverly. For instance, instead of trying to burn out the creature, squashing it by using propulsion. Very clever use of his powers that we've already established that are limited. So it kind of has the best of both worlds in that it's the soft opaque point system. Then it's also, which keeps the magic still mysterious and enjoyable. And then it's also got the cost system in there, so you can do more powerful things, but at a risk, explaining what those are. And then we also have the levels cleverness factor by him using his powers in clever ways. Ha ha ha. So why is this such a popular book? Why are there like 15, 16 of them right now, or probably more, who knows? Probably if I had the internet and looking it up right now, I would and have done better research instead of thinking about the world building all day. I have a couple of theories why it's so successful. First of all, it's fantasy as an other, and this is the idea that it's really a noir novel. It's a noir story, a hard-boiled detective story, but done with magic, which is kind of cool. And this is something that Marvel's been doing, or has been pointed out, Marvel's been doing since Phase 2 or whatever. Ant-Man is a heist movie, I think it was. At least, the second Avengers movie was a heist movie. Captain America 2 was a espionage type of film. So each time they're following all the beats and the story structures of different genres, but then incorporating superhero stuff into it. In this case, that's what he's doing, where he's taking noir and the hard-boiled detective stories and then bringing magic into it. So it seems new, even though it is the same beat. So you're getting satisfaction from following one genre as well as the second genre. So you're getting double dopamine pops, which is really a good idea. It also has the illusion of completeness in terms of the world building. Completeness is one of the 4 C's of world building. It's one of the things that makes the world feel really real and lived in, and but you can't put all the details in it. So you do a few throwaway details of like things that we will we'll address later. So the never never and the White Council and what are the rules and that kind of thing. They're little hints, and you're like, oh, I hope this will be in another book series, another time that they'll get to explore this. So it gives a sense of the world as much outside of the scope that you're currently reading and invites you to read and imagine more. And finally, that it is a very episodic series, which, as I mentioned before, you can pick it up, put it down anytime you want. But that means every single book is a point of entry for the series. So instead of having a book 1, and if you liked it or not, like you have to read book 1 to read book 2, it's a commitment. This time you can pick them up at the airport, anywhere, read any type of book, and not have to go finish the series. So it's a great chaser, and that's really, really useful to it. So standalone stories within the same shared world, slight continuity, but really each one stands alone, and so each one is just as good, or could be just as good, and a place to come in. So 15 chances to come into this series rather than just the one. Still abiding by the same rules, each one building on it, but in exploring different aspects of it. So it really serves the world building, which serves the plot, which serves all the other things. So yeah, Dresden, it's got a TV series, very short-lived one, I think, out of it, and that just goes to show that it's transmedial, which is another one of the things that you should really look for in your world building. It shows that it's imaginative and effective. So there you go, Jim Butcher's Dresden series, great world building, very effective, and the use of first person, episodic, and really the illusion of completeness. So keep those in mind when you're working on your own series and your own world, and hope you build better worlds.